Yeah. The things usually that make me stop reading is if it's not proofreading, is the pacing. Oftentimes, there are some books where the authors don't seem to know when the plot should go fast and when it should go slow, and then sometimes you have a long slog throughout the middle of the book that's really very limited with in terms of plot progression, and then suddenly you have like a small section where it's very quick plot progression and then slow again, stuff like that. That really is something that makes me bored, I'd say, when I'm reading. So yeah, with regards to what makes me stop, usually it's the pacing.
Yeah, that's great. I also have reasons why I will not finish reading the book if it gets boring to me. And if the book it's too full of narration. I've been saying this, I've read, I love reading independent published author. And from my experience reading most of those books, I've seen that, well, some are not well properly edited, and some are just so full of narration. I don't like reading a book where you feel narration, no action. I don't like books
Yeah.
that doesn't have action. That I cannot imagine the character's conversation in my head and paint image in my head as if I'm watching a movie. So if a book is so
Mhm.
boring to that aspect that it doesn't have good storytelling techniques, I cannot feel the characters, and it's just narration as if you're writing an article.
Mhm.
And no, I won't go
Mhm.
ahead with such kind of book. I'm gonna stop reading it.
Mhm.
And it's quite very funny that Naomi have a sort of a different perception towards Lord of the Ring. Well, I haven't read Lord of the Ring yet, but I've heard quite a lot of description about people praising it, hyping it. There's even one I saw
Mhm.
recently of someone who uploaded a WhatsApp status, and they was like, he's gonna watch the movie. Like I said, okay, I'm not gonna watch the movie, but I'm gonna read the book. It was like, you had better
Mhm.
watch the movie than reading the book because I know you like books too much. I said, no, I prefer reading than
I have
watching.
I have the books. The third one is propping my camera up at the moment. And I think that is the thing. Part of why I don't like Lord of the Rings is because there is a lot of this narrative describing the scenes, you know, having describing how you walk to the door, how you put your hand on the handle, how you open the door, how the character opens the door, and it just feels over overdone to me compared to lots of other writers where I know because I know how the character. I know I can imagine it more fully because I know the character.
Yeah. It's very descriptive, and I often tends to spend a couple of pages on stuff that really isn't needed. But yeah, I get you say it is an old book, so
I mean, it's difficult because a lot of old books back then, it was very
Mm.
descriptive, but it's also like it can help the atmosphere of the book that it's trying to give off, but it's just the
Mm-hmm.
level of how far they go, which can,
Mm.
bend or break a person.
yeah. I think definitely the movies improved upon that. They're not nearly
Mm.
as although they are long, they cut out a lot of the extra fluff.
Mm-hmm.
That's true.
And
Well,
they are interesting characters. Yeah.
Yeah. I think Aragorn is more interesting in the movies. He has more of a character arc in the movies. So I think on some
Mm-hmm.
points it's even improved in the
Mm-hmm.
adaptation.
Yeah, it's very rare to find a book where the film is actually better than the book,
Yeah.
but I think that's one of them.
now, I also want to ask, who is your favorite author? If you have a book that you've read of the particular author you would love to talk about that makes you love the author so much, you love to start from Oscar.
Yeah.
Oh,
I don't think my answer is gonna surprise anyone. Um, my favorite author is Brandon Sanderson.
oh,
Um, and I love this, as I said, what I love the most about his the books that I love the most that he's written is the Stormlight Archive. But a lot of the other books that he's written are also amazing, although not, nearly as epic fantasy as Stormlight Archive. The Mistborn, for example, is probably his most famous books, if only because they're older. Um, and I absolutely loved the characterization of the main character in Mistborn. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. How about you, Naomi?
I think probably my favorite author, not just for the writing, but also for the person, is Neil Gaiman. And I have a whole shelf of Neil Gaiman. It's just sort of somewhere behind me here. And that I find his storytelling to be so, on one hand, very whimsical and fantastic, but then the characters are so human, and I can just see through their eyes. And then I think I actually like the way Neil Gaiman is handling image, particularly just recently with the Sandman being adapted to TV series, and there being lots of gender flipping and ethnicity flipping within some of the characters. Even before people, some of those gatekeepering type people started going, oh, well, you can't have a Black Death. It's like, yeah, Neil Gaiman preempted it, put it on social media. I like the way my new death is. You need to see her to see how she works. That's Death as a character for anyone that hasn't read the Sandman stories. And so Neil Gaiman very much as a personality has come in and gone, no, everyone has a right to like my stories. Everyone has a right to see themselves in my stories. And it's just very welcoming. And he even replied to my tweet when However the Milk came out, which was a fabulous, fantastic story. And I sat there for 3 hours, read front cover to back cover out loud to my son, who was about 3 at the time. And then I tweeted how much he'd enjoyed it, and got a reply by Neil Gaiman saying, "That's really nice." And it was just like, ooh, little fangirl moment. But yeah, I just, there isn't one of the Neil Gaiman books that I go, oh, I don't like that.
Oh, Naomi, then, would you recommend watching that I should watch the Netflix show, or should I just read the graphic novel instead with the Sandman?
Watch the show, because the show is amazing. The comic books are also amazing, but there are differences. And they work in different ways. They work in your head in different ways. And there's also the audio book through, which is an Audible original. And I was really cautious of how an audiobook of a graphic novel would work. But it does. It's almost like because of the way the story works, it transcends that all those sort of barriers between the different modes. You know how something like Hitchhiker's Guide, you've got all right, Hitchhiker's Guide, the film was rubbish, but it was enjoyable in ways. And then you've got Hitchhiker's books, you've got and you've got the Hitchhiker's radio plays. Each one works on their own, but are thoroughly enjoyable on their own. But you could move from one to the other and still enjoy all of them, because the humor and the way the world works is the thing that really makes them work. So you can choose, read the books first or watch the TV series first, and you'll enjoy either way.
Okay.
I hope.
Noah.
Mine's not going to be as much of a surprise for people, but it's H.P. Lovecraft. Shock horror, I know. 1920s horror author who wrote horror stories for the atheists, because he didn't believe in gods or anything like that, and how we were all just these ants in the universe and how we didn't matter. Like, absolutely love that. He pretty much metaphorically popped my cosmic horror cherry. So I always want to promote, like, he's very known for like the Call of Cthulhu. Cthulhu's well known because he becomes this little cult sort of like little memes but you can buy Cthulhu anywhere these days. You know, he's well known for that sort of stuff. Short stories, you know, like Dagon, Mountains of Madness, Reanimator, all that sort of stuff. He wrote these amazing short stories. Yeah, like some of them can be very descriptive when they first start, but as soon as you get past them first initial pages, absolutely amazing. Like I hate the man, but I love his stories at the same time, because his views I don't agree with. He would hate me as a person, but I enjoy his stories.
Yeah, I was just going to ask about that, because H.P. Lovecraft has a
reputation.
A reputation as a racist and a homophobe.
Absolutely.
But it's one of those cases where, yeah, if the story stands on their own without that, you can still enjoy the stories without liking the person.
Absolutely.
Mentioning no magical series at all.
Yeah, I see where you're coming with that. No, but yeah, like he was known for being racist, homophobic, bigot, and all that stuff. And in when he first started writing, you do see that, unfortunately. But as time goes on, and he actually does educate himself, like he even married a Jewish woman, and he changed certain things about himself. You see all that stuff like just start to ebb away from his stories, and that's where the stories I start to love even more.
So where would you suggest starting with Lovecraft then? What would be the first story to look at?
I would say there's one that he actually ended up writing with his wife called The Horror at Martin's Beach. It's very short, but it has this very motherly feel to it, and I love it to bits.
I've also heard that a lot of his creatures are based on his dreams.
They are. True? Yeah, all of his stories and everything, all these monstrosities are based on his dreams and fears of what is actually out there in the ocean. So
very interesting.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's quite great. And it seems you love reading voluminous book. Noah, do you enjoy voluminous books? Because the ones you've been showing so far very voluminous, and I just thought about it. I think he loves voluminous books.
Yeah, no, I've seen. Yeah. I definitely want to grab my hands on some things.
That's quite great. Now, I also want to ask, what is the book that changed or influenced you the most? Is that, we all have a kind of books that change people's life, as we all know. That's power in books, information in book. And I'm curious to ask, what is the book that changed or influenced you the most? I'd love to start from Noah too.
Oof, that's a difficult one. Because there's a lot, like it's been how many years since you start reading when you're little, and everything just kind of blurs by as the year goes on. So there's so many books that I've read. There's one that I just can't remember what it's called. I read it was like 8 or 9 years ago. I can't remember who it was by, but I remember the story of the book, and it was about how this person kind of became terms with themselves, how they were transgender, and how it was for them to go through all this sort of process, and how they got comfortable with themselves and the people around them and stuff. And that changed my life, because then it was something that I could relate to, which I've never seen in a book before. And I've been looking for it ever since for many years.
Oh, that's great. Naomi.
So I think it's the same thing. It's that finding that book that kind of tells you that it's okay to be you. So this is one of my copies of Alice in Wonderland. Somewhere or other I've got the original one that used to fit in my skirt pocket when I was a child, with these which was a sort of quite a small edition. But for me, Alice in Wonderland, which I think I first picked up when maybe I was 7 or 8, it was like the first time I saw a thinking girl character, someone who asked questions and thought strange thoughts and wandered through the world, kind of puzzling her way through. And although, in some ways the character is very distant from me in sort of background and through time, I saw something that allowed me to be me, I think. In a way that I don't think I experienced again until I read Oranges Are Not the Only Fruit by Jeanette Winterson, which again, it was sort of oh, this is someone who gets what my life is about and how my brain works. So I think that's what really has been important for me in finding myself in literature. Maybe that's what kind of why I'm so fascinated by providing those images to other people.
That's fantastic. How about you, Oscar?
I think the book that influenced or changed me the most is the book that got me into reading in the first place, and that is Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson.
Again.
And it was I first got introduced to it actually 2 years ago was when I began reading, and that was because my brother had gotten them for his birthday, and then I started reading them too, and before that I'd always really disliked reading, mostly because how I was introduced to it in school. I think a lot of the books that I read in school I found very boring. But I loved Mistborn, and it was what introduced me to the fantasy genre as like the modern fantasy genre, and it's also what got me into writing. So because I'm writing on my own book, and that's also due to this book. So I really appreciate this book. Very very beautiful book.
Wow, that's great. That's quite fascinating to me. I was also going to ask, how much of reading are you going to do this year and next year? Do you have plans for books? How much do you plan reading? Start from you to Oscar.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a very fast reader, but I plan to finish the Stormlight Archive series. And then I plan to get into Joe Abercrombie with The First Law and a lot of his books. I think there are quite a lot of those, but I've heard very good things about The First Law. It's a grimdark fantasy, so it's a lot darker than the other books I've read so far. But I'm very interested to kind of see a different side of fantasy, of the fantasy that I've read so far, because mostly fantasy is very fantastical. And I, from my understanding, the First Law is very much the opposite of that, and in many ways, represent a different side of fantasy. So I'm very excited about that.
Yeah, and I see that you love Brandon Sanderson's book. That reminds me of a particular video I watched on your channel where you talked about Brandon Sanderson. You talk about his education, his life career, how he grew up as an author, etc. And when I even watched the video, it was quite motivating to me, and I did love it. I think I left a comment on it. I was like, "Wow, I love this video. It's quite motivational." So
Thank you.
go back to your love for Brandon Sanderson.
Yeah, I think the way he writes and the way he talks with his fan base is very different from the normal author. He's very transparent with his fan base, and I think that's a very good strategy. So
Yeah, I'd love to read one of his books very soon. How about you, Naomi?
Well, I've got 2 more weeks of school holidays, so I'm going to be reading as much as I can get away with. And then once the school term starts, I'm then back to lots of audiobooks. I probably go through 2 or 3 audiobooks a week just on my commute, wandering between schools and doing different things. So I'm got lots to read there. I'm at the end of September, I'm booked in to speak at a conference for teachers of the deaf. So I've got a number of books around the themes of deafness to read, because they've actually asked me to come in and stand in front of a group of people and talk about what I love books. There can be nothing wrong with this. apart from it's quite daunting. But yeah, so I don't really plan out my reading. I kind of keep the books pile up, and I try and keep, and then I just take one off the pile and read it. But I think the focus at the moment is towards this conference at the end of September.
Oh, that's fascinating. Noah.
Oof, that's difficult. We've got another just over 3 months left until the new year. That's terrifying. I've got quite a few books that I've got to read. I've got gunmetal gods, like some dark fantasy. I've got more Nick Cutters. I've got like the alien books and stuff because I decided I wanted to go into that. Hopefully quite a few with me working and stuff. I can probably get through quite, another like 20 books or so, hopefully.
Oh, that's fascinating.
More than I'll get through, that's for sure.
It's hard sometimes to find time for reading, and so much depends on how you're traveling to work and how what your work is like. I mean, if you want to count all the picture books I read to children, that's lots. But yeah, I think it's that bit where you go, it's actually very difficult to plan out for the following year what you're going to read.
Oh, that's true.
Scary.
Also, I was going to ask you too, which I could see as sort of a different question. How many books do you have in your TBR list? I don't know I know we readers love to compile lists of TBRs. I can't count how many books I've got on my list. I'm going to read this, but eventually I never make out time to read it. I never find time to read it, but I want to read it. So I want to ask, how do you make your TBR list? How much of books do you have in your TBR list, and how do you go about them? Start from Oscar.
Yeah. I've got much of Joe Abercrombie's works, as I've said, and then I plan to read Babel by Rebecca Kuang that came out, I think, soon, but it's out in some bookstores already. I'm not sure, but that sounds very interesting and has received very good reviews. And then I guess some Stephen King, probably. I have never read Stephen King, and I would like to get into some of his books. He is one of the most famous authors out there, so yeah.
How about Naomi?
I tend to get see books recommended and go, oh yeah, I must get that one. At the moment, I've got, I think, about 10 books on a shelf downstairs, which are the books that I'm planning to read over the next, actually, as long as it takes. I've got about 10 books, but then there will be new things added to that all the time. And I've always got more books around than I have time to read. I've tried all sorts of different listing things like Goodreads, but that just ends up in me finding new things that I want to read, and the list just gets longer and longer. But I think it's so easy. There are so many books, so many stories, and it's just finding different things at different times.
That's fantastic. How about you, Noah?
I mean, if you check my Goodreads, there's over 100 books on there that I've just found through other people. But mainly it's me and my best friend will talk about books that we want to read, and we'll make this huge list. And that's what we do. We read same books at the same time, then we'll talk about them afterwards and stuff. And that's what it really goes for. But yeah.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I also want to ask, how do reviews make you feel, choose book? Do you choose a book by reading based on the reviews you've read, or you just choose it intentionally based on your own personal opinion of wanting to read the book? Love to start from you to know.
Everyone has their own opinions on books, and yes, well, I do have a look at the reviews because I like to kind of have a look into the book first before I go and buy it. Yeah, it's I do sometimes go off the reviews. But it's everyone has their own thing that they like, though, don't they? So it's difficult because one person can think this is amazing. It's like Marmite, you like it or you don't.
Yeah.
I'd like to see what they think, and then I think I'd rather make up my own opinion, and then I'll go and read it either way. I'm terrible.
Naomi.
I like to read read reviews and to pick up reviews on YouTube and so on, because it's you what the themes are, and you can kind of go, even a negative review, you can go, oh, they don't like it because of that, that, and that. Well, I like that, that, and that. So that sounds like what I might read. And sometimes some of the books that are most popular and have the most views, and you pick them up and go, nah, not for me. I definitely experienced that with Twilight. Everyone was reading Twilight. I think I was a bit old for it, maybe, but I sort of picked it up and read it to try and understand why other people were raving about it so much. And went, no, there's better vampire books. Read Anne Rice. Read Poppy's Dead Bright. Now they're vampires, but yeah, I think looking at reviews is a really good way to get a feel for the content of books without having to to find out what it is that you're going to enjoy.
Where did you hear that Twilight was a good book? I mean, in all the circles that I'm in, I'm basically told the opposite most of the time.
My niece was 15 at the time. When this is going back to when they were first coming out, and I mean, for my niece, for whatever reason, Twilight was just the most amazing thing, and so I picked it up to read it to see if I could see what she was seeing in it, and I didn't. But particularly for that group, that teenage group, Twilight had something that they were seeing and something they were getting out of it. I think some of the themes in the Twilight stories are just pretty scary, but in what messages they give, particularly young girls, about relationships. But it was just phenomenal in, what was it, the mid-90s, maybe 2000s, I can't remember. It must have been the 2000s because the age of my niece. But yeah, I think different people reading books get different things out of it. I think that's probably one of the most interesting things about stories.
Yeah, definitely. I also think, as it's gotten introduced to a bigger audience, everyone that don't usually read YA, they kind of give in their thoughts. And I think, that its reputation has probably changed a bit over time. So
true,
that's true. Thank you. I mean, I usually check the Goodreads ratings. And also if it's new books written by authors that I already know are very good at writing, if Rebecca Kwong with Babel, or if whenever Brandon Sanderson releases a new book, I'm gonna go read it, right? But then aside from that, it's mostly I guess BookTube reviews and ratings, because I like to make sure that the books that I'm gonna read, that I'm gonna love them in advance, I guess, because I don't like reading books I don't like.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I also want to ask this. Do we have a book that I would love to recommend? Like, do you have any books you love to recommend? Love to start from Noah.
It depends on what kind of genre people are into. Like, if they do want to read like the YA sort of books, there's a series called Night World by L.J. Smith.
Yeah.
She originally wrote the Vampire Diaries and stuff like that. Very dark and stuff. But I think the main thing I would want to recommend is The Fisherman, which is an aquatic horror more than anything, about how these two men go on a fishing boat. and just things are not what they seem as they're on this boat in the middle of nowhere.
Great. How about Naomi?
Now, obviously, I read a lot of stuff aimed at younger people. Probably one of the books that I've read quite recently that really, I would say, was fascinating to me, and I'd recommend is The Love and Lies of Rukhsana Ali. And I'm afraid I can't remember the author, but it was it's one of those books where you really see another culture. Well, for me, coming from a white British perspective, to see the life of you've got an American girl, an American Bangladeshi, who gets caught with her girlfriend by her parents, and they send her back to Bangladesh to find a husband. And there's just a really nice voice through it of this girl making sense of the two cultures that she belongs to and finding her way through, and then finding a way to help her family to understand her and rebuild her family life. So I think that's definitely one that, particularly if you like sort of romance and coming of age stories, is one that I definitely recommend.
Yeah, that's great. And I'm sure Oscar would love to recommend another Brandon Sanderson, right?
Yeah. I would recommend almost every Brandon Sanderson book out there. But for the sake of not repeating myself, I would also recommend the Witcher book series. I think they're great and very different from the TV shows. So if you watched the TV show and you didn't like it, don't let that stop you from reading the books, because they're basically nothing alike. It's the characters, they have the same names, they kind of look like they're described in the books, and that's basically where the similarities end. In terms of the story and definitely the character writing, the Witcher books are a lot more interesting. I mean, if you like fast-paced books, The Witcher's probably not for you, but it has a standard plot, but very very good characterization. It's a very charming book. It really feels like fantasy in a weird way that a lot of fantasy actually don't. So I mean, I would like to hear what sort of genres you guys are reading. I know Noah's reading cosmic horror, and I'd love to hear like which of the Lovecraft books that you love the most. I heard you recommended one. I don't remember what this name was, but which of them are your favorites of the short stories?
It would have to be the horror at Martin's Beach that he wrote with his wife, and the Mountains of Madness. It's just classed as a short story, but it's a few pages more. But I absolutely adore it. The only problem is that puts people off is at the beginning it's very descriptive, but as soon as you get past that little bit where it just tries to build this atmosphere, it goes straight into it.
Oh. I mean, I definitely would like to check out some Lovecraft. I've only read one very short story, so I would like to know, how to get into it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think I've only read very little. Is it something Org? That Lovecraft? That was a very long time ago.
Trying to think. I'm not sure about that one.
So I